I'm Kristen Anderson. Welcome to Most Amazing Woman. We are going to gather around the virtual campfire and hear each other's powerful stories of transformation. Join me. This is Courtney Bolhman. Today we are talking about forgiveness and compassion.
Compassion, this last weekend at this local retreat, we were identifying like what really makes us special. And compassion was one of the things that came up for me in that circle, and it's really what's allowed me to be so powerful at what I do in my spaces. It's like anybody could bring literally anything to me, and I could hold them in compassion.
Do you have a story that you can share with us that leads you to an aha moment when you really discovered the depth of forgiveness and compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. So much of my journey has been this discovery of forgiveness and compassion, so there's definitely many things I can speak to, but one of the most powerful parts of my story that really taught me these at a core level would be, so it was in college, I would say, when it first kind of started. I was 19 years old, and I had been walking home from the library one day after school, and I remember I was running late, and I was at kind of a moment of, do I take the path I always take home that I know is safe and well lit, or do I take one of these alleys to just get back faster so I get there on time? And chose the back alley, and what that led to was this experience of kind of being followed by this man, and I ended up getting raped in this alley. And for a few years I really didn't talk to anyone about it. A few close friends knew, but it was something that I was really just shoving down and kind of not looking at. And in this kind of course of these few years, I hadn't realized that I had actually, in this experience, I ended up getting an STD. Now it's actually an STI, so it is an infection that doesn't stay in the body, but HPV, super common. It's like crazy common. It's like 90-some% of the population has it, but men are carriers, and so women are the ones who have the actual physical experiences from it. Because it had been in my body for so long and I wasn't aware of it, it actually ended up turning into cervical cancer. And it's the only thing that can create cervical cancer in the body.
How long to the time that you found out?
It was years. I mean, it was literally years. I was in my mid-20s when I found out that I had cancer. And my doctors were able to pinpoint it back that far because of how far along it had come. And just kind of the process of the growth of that in the physical body. And so, yeah, I had it in my body for many years, and finally discovered it when I had some experiences of pain. I had a lot of physical pain and all of these things that were coming through that led me to find answers.
How did that make you feel?
Ooh, all of the cycles of that journey, for sure. I felt confused, definitely confused, angry. I've been very healthy my whole life. I've chosen the path of yoga, just cared for my body, healthy food, and just really loved my body, really took care of my body, and I was just kind of blown away that something like this could happen inside of my body when I cared for it so well.
Right.
And then that anger kind of transitioned into, I guess, acceptance. And then after acceptance, deep sadness and fear again. And then at one point it just kind of clicked that I was no longer going to be a victim. I was going to take control of this in my life experience, and I decided to heal and kind of took my own journey with that, because I definitely didn't take the traditional path of healing.
Tell us more. That's the intriguing stuff we all want to know. What is your non-traditional path?
I mean, I started with the Western approach. I did cell removal. I went through 5 or 6 rounds of cell removal, which is basically where they just scrape your cervix and they just try to cut the cells off. And it's really painful. You have to do it without anything, so you can really allow your body's physical response to let you know how deep is safe in your body. And so it was a very painful procedure, and I did it until I got to a point where that wasn't an option anymore. And so the doctors had said you can do chemotherapy or chemotherapy. And I had, as a young girl, watched my grandfather die from chemo, not from cancer. I watched him die from chemo. And so there was no question for me of whether I would do that or not. I knew I was not going to be taking that path. And thankfully, I had already been accepted to an Ayurveda internship program to live in India and to study Ayurveda. And I was on this wait list, and it was like a whole process. But then the timing was absolutely perfect because I had hit this choice point of to do chemotherapy or to take a different route. And I had already had this plan to move to India in 2 weeks and to take this Ayurvedic healing journey. And I just knew that it all aligned for a reason. And I decided to stick with that initial call towards Ayurveda. And I ended up moving to India and did a kind of a joint, both as a student and as a person, healing. I did the journey, and I didn't tell my doctor, my teacher, when I arrived. He was just my teacher at the time, and I sat down with him, and the first meeting he took my pulse, and then he looked at me and he said, "I hope I'm not the first person to tell you this, but you have cancer in your body." And for me, I know. And for me, it was that. It was like, I knew I was going to be okay. Because if he could tell in a single moment that was in my body, I knew
from
he
your
could help
pulse?
me. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be able to pinpoint cancer like that? Wow.
Yeah.
And he was your teacher?
And he was my teacher. And then he became my doctor.
Whoa.
So it was a really beautiful journey then, because I got to implement everything I was learning on myself. And everything I learned, I got to practice. And I got to, both be a student and be a receiver. And then as I moved into the internship, I got to really practice it with other people and talk about my own experience, because I was walking the path as I was learning it and as I was offering it to those who needed that healing journey as well. So I felt so incredibly supported. As crazy as this story was to get me there, I almost feel like the reason I learned it so deeply and the reason I know it on such a profound level is because it saved my life.
When did this guy in the alley come back to haunt you, and how did you deal with that?
Even as I was kind of on the healing journey, I just kind of pretended like I didn't know how it happened. I didn't know how I got cancer. I didn't know, and I really wasn't ready to look at it yet. I just had to focus on healing. And so every time it even crept into my awareness, I shoved it back down. And I know as the path I walk now that keeps it in your body, and it only allows all of that to grow and expand. But I just wasn't ready at that point to really do the deep work to heal it at that core level, to transition fully into forgiveness and compassion. But that definitely came after the healing of the cancer, when I had that space and capacity to really look at it, because I teach people, your path is to support you, it's to help you learn what you need to learn. And at some point I became a hypocrite as I taught things that I didn't, at a deep, deep core level, allowed to be a truth through all of my experience. I allowed it to be a truth through most of my experience. And that was the one realm that up until about 2.5, 3 years ago, I didn't really do the work, deep work for it.
Do you remember the moment when you found forgiveness, or was it just kind of the movement of the clock, like there it is?
It was, I mean, a little of both, but there's definitely a moment. And it was two and a half years ago when I was actually in Ecuador, and I was sitting at this park and I was watching this couple that was just like so deeply in love, sitting on the bench, and I was watching them like cuddle and kiss and just like so deeply in joy and in love. And I kind of like saw this man off in the distance kind of like watching, and he had kind of darker energy and like a really just not safe vibration, and he was like watching them. And when they got up, I just kind of went up to them and I just told them, you know, I just was witnessing this man, and just kind of be careful as you leave. And then after they left, I like sat down and I really sat with it, and I like sat with looking, and I was like looking at that man, and I could feel his pain, and I could feel like just the weight of his life and his stories and his experiences, and it just like bloomed in me, this feeling of compassion for him and his life and his pain, and it just then instantly flipped to that man in my life experience, and I was able to really see it in a different lens than I had carried prior.
What would you tell other women if you could guide them?
What I've really come to understand is this like core understanding of just the way that life and the universe and spirit is supporting us always. And I know that can sound really crazy in those moments, like rape and cancer and all of the things I've talked about today. You know, how could we possibly have compassion for someone who harmed us in that way? But it took me through this kind of whole life journey, this one moment, this one incident. And as I've gotten older and the work I do in the world, I've gotten to look at it again and again and again, and all the layers of all of the healing that we do, and how many times it arises and comes up for us. And I've done a lot of work around it and understood that, you know, who I am today was co-created from all of these experiences that I've had in my life. And a lot of what I teach is compassion and forgiveness. And so I've taken the time to really look at this experience and to hold compassion for the soul who did this, knowing that only a being who is in a lot of pain, who is hurting, who is suffering, has the capacity to harm another in that way. I think the forgiveness was easier to come when I was able to move towards gratitude in its own way, because it taught me so much about who I am, and it led me down the path I'm on today. It led me down a healing journey. It led me to find Ayurveda. It led me to so much of what I do in the world today. And so, yeah, it's been a journey, and it still comes up sometimes, you know, like those stories and those experiences that we think we've healed, and something can trigger it, and then it's like, oh, there's a little more work to do, there's a little bit deeper to go here. What I've realized on my journey is that the hardest moments prepared me to become who I am. And for so long I've really felt like, you know, everything was happening to me. You know, this happened to me, and I'm a victim of these experiences, and you know, why am I not being supported? Why am I not being loved? Why is this happening to me? Poor me.
My God.
Yeah.
Why? Yes, I'm a good person.
I'm
Why?
a good person. I care for my body. Yep.
Yes.
And it was that just finally, the more reflection, the more I looked at my story, the more I looked at my journey, the more I looked at what I've learned and how far I've come, I was able to finally see that nothing was happening to me and everything was happening for me. And I think that's the shift. I think that's the shift from being the victim of your life and being the leader of your life, being a co-creator Because granted, I don't believe it all has to happen, but the fact of the matter is that these things do happen. And so we can be a victim to them, or we can look at what can we learn from them? How can we become more because of these experiences? How can we grow stronger but also softer? How can we have, that strength in knowing we can get through anything, but also that compassion and that softness to know that we can also love through anything. So it's both sides, because often I think we talk about the strength. I'm strong because of this, I'm stronger, I'm a survivor, and I've never even taken ownership. Like, people are like, oh my God, you're a survivor, and I'm like, I'm a thriver. Like, I'm just yeah, and it's not just the strength of the story, but it's the softness, it's the masculine and the feminine. We go stronger and we go softer through all of the journey. Yeah, so that transition to understand that life is happening for you, not to you. And there's the deepest blessing and the biggest wealth of wisdom available in everything we've gone through if we are brave enough to look at it, look for it, and integrate it.
How did that form the foundation for the work that you do now?
I think that the compassion piece and this ability to understand that hurting people hurt others, and the story and the pain in the individuals on the planet and also our collective as a whole. Having done social work, and I just led a path that let me see a lot of the truth of what people were experiencing, and like truth of the human experience that is also weighted with a lot of pain and a lot of suffering and struggle and all the things. And the schools really birthed as this like deep knowing that right now, the way that the world is and the way society is, that this pain and this suffering, quote unquote, is a part of the human experience. It's part of the journey. But how can we handle it? How can we cope? How can we understand it, integrate it, heal from it instead of be trapped by it? And that brought me back to the understanding as children. If we could learn as a child how to process our emotions, how to process our experiences, learn social interaction, learn about spirituality, learn that we are all connected, and your pain is my pain and your suffering is my suffering. And like, if we could learn this as a child, how would our world change and transform? And that was the like birthing, was like that ability to witness what was happening in the world. And as much as I feel called to serve adults through all of this as well, the deeper way to do this work is to start with children, because then they don't have to do all of the fucking work we're doing. Like, they just know it and they understand it, and
they get a leg up.
And our school systems teach the mind, they teach the intellect. It's focused on one realm of our being only.
Right.
And we are so multifaceted, social, emotional, spiritual, physical, all of the realms, and the intellect, of course.
Right.
But our school systems teach us to live in our mind. It teaches disconnect. It teaches us not how to process our feelings, but to power through with the strength of our mind. And I taught in that system, and it didn't work. And I tried
you were
to
a
change.
teacher.
Yeah. 10 years in all forms of teaching, whether that was public schools, spiritual schools, new birthing schools. Like, it was this journey to try to teach children to be a whole being as a child. And I was really struggling to find grounding in the States. And I would work at these amazing schools, but they'd only make it a year, 2 years, because we wouldn't pass the state testing and we would lose funding. And it was like all these things because the United States isn't supportive fully yet of the transition of our school systems. So the birthing of these schools was just this supportive path of like finding myself at this education symposium that I really, at that point in my life, didn't feel like I belonged at. It was like a last minute opening, a speaker canceled, and I knew someone who was like, you need to step in, and that's what landed me on this space, and to speak about what I was doing at just as a school teacher at a spiritual school, and trying to integrate the whole being, and then listening to these speakers from Africa, and listening from they're pouring their hearts about the needs of their children, and the needs of education, and the needs of a different form of education that wasn't violence-based and that wasn't through fear. And just everything in me was like, yes, like this is it, this is the next thing. And I remember just weeping, literally like snot. I'm like, wow. Like everything in me was like, this is it. And then like talking to them and asking questions and being like, well, we need someone to come and teach our teachers. And they're like, we'll write you a letter of recommendation, wait to apply. And I like went home that night and I applied, and was just like, this is it, I know this is it, I don't need any of that. Like I'm getting a phone call at 6 a.m. the next morning and doing this phone interview and getting this position to go to Africa and open these, like help transition the school from fear-based education to compassion-based education. And that wasn't their words, but I knew that that's what was being asked. And it's one of those moments where life presents you with something, and if you look at it in the present experience, it looks like you're surrounded in red lights, like this isn't possible. But if you can just say yes and trust, all of the movement allows, and all of the doors unfold. And like I had a job, right? I was teaching at a school. I was also teaching at a spiritual community. I had rent to pay. I had a dog to take care of. I had bills. I had all these things, and this was going to be an unpaid position. And it was like, you know, everything in my brain was like, this is impossible, but everything in my being was like, this is it. And talking to my school and them being like, oh, we have a teacher we want to trial train, you can step in. And talking to my other community and being like, we'll pay you while you're gone if you just keep answering your emails. And like my landlord literally being like, we so believe in what you're doing, you can keep your space for 3 months rent-free while you're gone in Africa doing this work. And my parents taking my dog, and it was just like green light, green light, green light. Everything was like supporting me because I said yes, and the like core essence of my being, yes, this is what I'm meant to do. And it was just like, and then found myself in Africa, met these beautiful beings, these children in a refugee camp without parents and food and home and all of it. And this very contradicting life experience of seeing the most suffering I've ever experienced in my life and the most joy I've ever experienced in my life. Because this was their life experience, so they could just be in their life. They could just be, they could laugh and they could play and they could just experience life because they accepted the reality that they had. Versus, you know, in America, we just have all these things that almost create stress in our experience because we're so attached and we need more, and it's just like hard to just be in our life experience. And so, yeah, just feeling really called to serve these souls. And
that's so cool. So what do they teach? How's it going? What do the teachers teach?
Yeah, I mean, so a big part of the transition was just teaching compassion-based education, teaching them to allow children the space to find their own voice, teaching outside the book, teaching outside the classroom, right? It's like, instead of drawing a picture of a tree on a chalkboard, let's go outside and let's touch a tree. Instead of like learning about these things in our minds, let's experience them in life. And so I really taught them to give themselves freedom as teachers. So when you feel inspired to teach outside of a lesson plan, to trust yourself and to go and to take them through the camps and to teach them everything you were teaching them, but through life experience instead of through a textbook and through the mind. And so that was a big part of it, was like freeing them up to teach beyond, and a lot of the books I had donated, right? So they were American textbooks. They were our way of teaching. So it's like giving a guidebook without being trapped by the guide.
Right.
And like, so teaching them the freedom of trusting themselves. But a big piece was compassion, teaching them to understand the emotional experience that these children were going through, and like understanding that these children are starving. These children are dirty. These children didn't have a good night's sleep. They often don't have parents. They don't have a home. So if that child is zoning out, looking out the window because his basic needs are not being met, how do we meet them with compassion instead of aggression, instead of hitting the child, which was what was happening? Like hitting the child, how can we communicate with the child? What do you need? How would you be more engaged with this? Like, what can I do as a teacher to support you as a student? And like engaging them in real conversation with their students. And when a child was acting out, instead of forcing them to be something they couldn't be in that moment, can you ask them, why are you doing this? Why is this happening? What are you feeling? And teaching them to have just genuine connection with their students, teaching them the value of the voice of the child that they were working with, and that child is carrying so much wisdom and is teaching you as you teach him or her. And like really exploring the dynamic of the student-teacher relationship, and like that you're both roles at all times. And when you can do that, what can happen is profound, because you can grow and learn together and you can expand together. And so it was just this total transformation of what was possible as a teacher, and I couldn't do it in the States. I didn't fit the regulations I was being forced into. And so when I had the freedom to explore this way of teaching and education in a system that had no structure, it was able to really become something beautiful. And that was kind of like just this really profound experience of like, okay, this is possible. Now, you know, shifting it at some point to the United States, because I definitely am like core radical, like destroy this core system. But
I'll be part of your army.
Yeah.
So how many schools do you have there?
So we had the one that I had first come into, and then we were able to expand that one. So now there's 2 schools in this refugee camp, and then there's 1 school back from in Liberia, where all these refugees are from.
Oh.
And so that's in one of the villages in Liberia. So there's 3.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And how often do you go there? Like how often? I mean, you live here,
Yeah.
right? So how do you handle that? Like teaching the teachers, do you guys Zoom, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning I was going every like 4 to 6 months, and I was spending like a month there each time. The first 2 times was 3 months, and it was really this just huge restructuring of belief, and it was so successful because these teachers wanted to be successful. They wanted a different way, but they didn't know a different way. And like being able to just show them in their own life experience. And I remember posing the question at one of my last talks of like, I hear you saying like, this is Africa. Because at first they were not as open. Like it took me being the example, but they would always say like, this is Africa. This isn't America. We do things different. This is Africa. And like having the conversation of, well, in America, we also used to hit our students. We also used to shame our students. We also used to yell at our students, and it didn't work. And so we've shifted. And here in Africa, you're in a refugee camp. You're in a refugee camp because of violence, and because of war, because you were pushed out of your life experience through violence. Was violence the answer? Do you believe that violence was the answer? Every single one of them. No, 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 no. Okay. So do you believe that violence is the answer with your students then? With your children? With the future generations? Yes, it's the path that you've walked, but someone can change the path. So do you want to be the ones who change the path? And like actually being like, do you want to change Africa? Like,
you're inspiring me. I'm like, I'm going to Africa. I'm going to teach the kids. How much fun.
Yeah, it was like divinely channeled. Like I remember just being like, do you want to change Africa? Do you want to be the change in Africa? And having these teachers stand up, these huge African men that I was still slightly frightened of,
right?
Stand up with tears on their cheeks saying, I didn't know.
Oh my God,
Like,
you're gonna make me cry.
Yeah, and for them, like one of the ones I saw that like gave this child a bloody nose the first day I was there, that totally derailed my entire belief in self, and that's its own journey. But for him to stand up and be like crying, I didn't know, but now I know, and I will change Africa. And it was like the deep belief in themselves to be the change birthed this entire thing. And so now with COVID and everything, going back has been a challenge, and like the regulations and all of it, but they own it for themselves now. It's no longer, it's not my movement. I birthed something for them to move forward. And so that's right now, honestly, I'm kind of sort of transitioning out in my own way of like, we've created these structures. They have an education where we've got a lot of computers donated, and so they teach like tech classes on the weekends and make money to fund the school. And we got garden projects growing, so we're supporting it with its own food. And they teach the parents after school and on the weekends, and so there's a little bit of money coming in for that. And so they're starting to sustain themselves in a way that I'm not needed, and I'm not the answer. I don't know how they need to teach their children.
Right.
I don't know how to be the change in Africa. I am not African. But I was a catalyst to the birthing of them stepping in their power and choosing a new path forward. And that's what's been really beautiful is like, and I've taken less ownership over schools in the past few years. I talk about it a lot less. I took it off my website, and it's not a lack of like, I'm so proud of it, but it's not about me. It's about, and I didn't know. I had no idea what was happening when it was happening. And honestly, I'm processing it right now. I'm like, holy shit, that is what was happening. Like, that is what I was. I was just this moment.
You were like a possibility. You showed up as another option of how to be that they had never seen before. Wow.
Yeah. And they are running with it, and they're teaching other teachers, and it's transforming. It's transforming so much, and they're doing it. Like, it is, they're creating these new ideas, they're birthing these new projects, they're getting new funders, they're like really doing incredible things. And we've got great partners in the States too. Like, we've got Life Straw supports and gives water filters, so they have clean water always in the school. We have multiple like protein powder companies, and so we have partnerships that are helping sustain the experience. But like, it's really beautiful to witness the expansion and the growth of this thing that I had no awareness I was even embarking upon.
Right.
I just was like, yes, that's me, I'm coming after.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a wild journey.
Yeah.
You are on a journey, girl. Wow.
Yeah. But that's what birthed Wholesome Alchemy then, because it was like, okay, now I've opened these schools. How do I fund them? How do I fund these schools? Like, how could I even support this project that I knew was meant to be created? And like, that's why Wholesome Alchemy started as a body care product company. We sourced our oils from these regions. We made these organic body care products. The profits went back to the schools. It was this beautiful circular experience, and then it also became really exhausting for me, and I needed a new path forward that let me light up, that sparked me, because I like making soaps and stuff, but I'm not on the planet to make body care.
Right.
Like, that's not my path.
Right.
So it's just been this trusting and unfoldment and spark. Every time I felt lit up, I listened and I stepped and I moved in that direction, and then something new presented itself. Until where I am now, where it's like all the little paths have come back to this point of connection, and it all makes sense, and like everything I've done is birthed into Wholesome Alchemy, into these retreats, into these offerings, and it's like this completion that I know is never really a completion, because it's continuing as long as I continue to grow and expand, right?
Right.
But
what school were you working for here?
I haven't taught in Florida, because I haven't been in Florida too long. But when I was in Colorado, it's actually no longer a school. It didn't survive. It didn't make it through. But one of the schools I worked at was called Elements Academy. So it works with the 5 elements of a child: social, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical. And it taught, it was really beautiful, and it taught spirituality and the concept of like, there are many religious paths and there are many teachings, but so many are the same. And so like teaching all of these possible paths, and then allowing the children to recognize the connection, allowing children to recognize the truth that all of the pathways were leading to the same place, and like just kind of guiding their exploration to understanding. And yeah, it was really special. And then the last few semesters I had my own pods. Like during like the beginning of COVID, I just had my learning pod. I had my first graders that were just my students, and I got the freedom to really play and explore and expand with them until the schools opened back up in Colorado. And then they went back to public school. But yeah, and this was all in the middle of the work in Africa, and it's all very, my path is not linear, and it doesn't really make sense to people. And I'm like, I was a school teacher for 10 years, and I lived in India, and I lived in China, and everyone's like, how did you draw this? You're 33, and I'm just like, so much is happening at the same time, and then I'm like, so it's,
Yeah, but I see it. I can see it. I see the path.
Yeah.
Very clearly, actually.
Yeah.
And it's really quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, to see how all the different things create the weave.
Yeah. And the fact that it's come back to adults now is so interesting, because all my education is with children, and not necessarily teaching an education master's isn't just children, but in my brain, it was children. I was here to serve the children. I was called to the children, and that was so much at the beginning of the path. And I think that the children are a lot easier to teach and guide and support than adults. And when I started to transition to adults, I was so afraid I couldn't do it. I was like, oh my God, like they're not children, this is harder. And it was harder, because we have our beliefs and our perceptions and our stories.
Right? Because at the core of every adult is a child.
And that's it. And it's like, okay, let's go back to like, where is this pain coming from? Let's look at it from an elevated state and not just sit in it, because that doesn't actually help us or heal us. So,
right.
And now it's the path with adults, and that's been really glorious and beautiful and unknown and unexpected. But I'm so capable of holding adults because of my work with children and my compassion with children, and all the tools I learned in that part of the path prepared me to work with adults in a really profound way that most adults aren't used to, because I'm used to working with children, and we need to be almost treated like a child, and held and loved and nurtured through this process of self-discovery and unbecoming to become, and the whole thing. It's like to be held in love and compassion, and all the things I developed as a school teacher. Thank you. That caffeine had me a little more chatty.
Yeah, you did good.
But I feel like I was realizing things as I was speaking, which is always so fun.
Yeah.
Like realizing some of the circle, some of the path, and the clarity of, like, I've never processed that I was a catalyst. I've never processed before that I was just this like opportunity of something different that they were able to then create with and become into, and that makes sense why I've felt this, like it's ready for me to step away, it's ready for me to, because so much energy goes to holding, but they don't really need me there, and
they've grown into it now. And you can put your attention,
trust
somewhere else and expand something else. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
It makes me feel a lot better about it, that having this realization, because I was struggling with stepping away. I was struggling with, no, I wasn't giving up on anything. I knew like that wasn't the energy, but it's hard to not feel like there's some degree of me like failing them or something for stepping away. That was,
you're not there and you can't be there and be that support.
Yeah. So I'm grateful to have this realization, because it feels a lot better to trust myself to move on
and trust them.
And trust whatever they want to do, whatever they want to create, because I always knew who am I to like come in and
You have to do it this way.
Yeah, that's colonization. That's what the white man's done for so long, and I never wanted to do that. I've always wanted to serve, and I can see that that really was an act of service, everything that happened, and so I'm grateful for this conversation and the realization of that.
Nice. I'm glad that you were able to receive something from it. That's cool. That's very cool. Well, and I'm sure that everyone watching will get some receiving too.
This most amazing woman, Courtney Bolhman. There she is.
Where can people find you if they want to dive deeper and work with you?
Well, my company is called Wholesome Alchemy. So you can just go to wholesomealchemy.com. We have lots of incredible transformational heart-based retreats, and we do the work. So definitely join if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to look at the past and the stories and lift them into the light and learn all the teachings and the blessings and the gifts and everything from that. And then I'm on social media, mostly on Facebook, but I also have an Instagram, so you can just find Courtney Bolhman. You can also find Wholesome Alchemy, my company, as well. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
thank you.